Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good afternoon for this first interview in the frame of the ECSEL Joint Undertaking Symposium 2021. We are going to use a slightly different format, using a series of specific interviews rather than in-person, unfortunately, symposium as we were used to do, or a PowerPoint presentation. I think we all have seen more than enough PowerPoints these days. We are more than pleased that for this kickoff of this round of interviews, we have with us Lucila Ciuli. She is the Director of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Industry at the European Commission DG Connect. Lucila, welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's our pleasure. We have been working together for some time under the ECSEL, and in the preparation now of this KDT. In some of the recent information communication of the Commission, it was all about the 2030 Digital Compass communication, yeah, which is, I think, pretty new for the audience. Can you a little elaborate on this, and what does it bring to our sector, the ECS semiconductor sector?
The Digital Decade communication was published a few weeks ago, and it identifies the compass for digital. Where do we want to be in 10 years' time? And this is important because, of course, the pandemic has shown how useful digital is, and somehow it has accelerated the uptake of digital. But then where do we go from here now that we all learn to work and study from home? And so we have provided some specific targets, and these targets cut across 4 different areas that, in our opinion, are the pillars of the digital transformation, and which include the digital transformation of business, so how many small, medium enterprises will be using certain technologies. We look at the transformation of the public administration, but also the skills required by digital society, and then the digital infrastructure. And in the digital infrastructure, in particular, we focus on microelectronics, because for us, computing power as well as the cloud are very much the basis of our digital infrastructure. Now, in microelectronics, we are setting a target which is found by many to be very ambitious, because basically we say that we would like the European semiconductor industry or microelectronics industry to have a market share of 20% by the end of the next decade, which means essentially doubling the current market share. And it may seem ambitious, but what is important is very much the meaning that underlines this particular target, because what we would like to see is for the microelectronics industry to strengthen itself and to become maybe less dependent and stronger in the development and in the design of components, as well as in their manufacturing. And so we think that the European industry has got these capabilities and needs to really think how these capabilities can translate themselves into a stronger industry. This is the right moment, because it's a moment in which we have funds from the Recovery and Resilience Fund, and therefore a lot of investment in the member states. We start a new multi-annual financial framework, so we have a new research program, a new joint undertaking. We will have a new project of common European interest, and an industrial alliance also in microelectronics. So we have a lot of instruments at our disposal right now that probably we didn't have before. And so we really hope that the European industry, together with the public sector, with the European Commission, organizes itself and to become stronger, also thanks to the use of the new instruments.
We have heard from different sides that that there is a shortage on chip supplies at this moment in time. Consequently, some of the automotive OEMs have to slow down or even stop some of the productions. They just were not not enough chips. What do we learn out of this this sudden shortage, and how could a partnership like ECSEL or KDT help on this?
I think that the shortage is due mostly to the volume adjustment that you mentioned, meaning that after COVID, there was a sudden resurgence in demand for these automotive chips. But because of COVID, the manufacturers were very busy in producing chips for computers and iPads and mobile phones and what have you. So there was a misalignment of the needs. And what this really shows is the fact that continues, that the manufacturing activity in the world is probably too concentrated at the moment. At the moment, we can, there are fantastic fabs in countries like Taiwan, South Korea. Some of these fabs will be also in the United States. In the European Union, we are reflecting deeply on the possibility of strengthening our manufacturing capabilities for automotive, but not only for automotive. There are new markets and new needs that are coming up. There is a world of artificial intelligence that is bringing a lot of new demand, and therefore I think that our policies should really align to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore.
True, and then obviously for this digital transformation and the need for the ECS, the electronic components and systems, we do not want to be too dependent on import from other regions. We want to have that capability of producing all these technologies largely here internally in the European market.
I just want to say that we don't really want to limit our imports. It's not that we want to close ourselves and we want to produce everything by ourselves. But what is very important for us is that we deal with technology that first of all respect our values. And so Green Deal objectives, energy efficiency, security, safety, data protection.
Lucila, here at the end of the interview, maybe is there any last statement you want to make, maybe in relation to the future partnerships?
I think that this is the ECSEL Symposium, and we have to be very proud of the way ECSEL has worked and what it has delivered in terms of technology advances. When we talk about advanced fabs nowadays, we are also talking about equipment capabilities that have been developed in the European Union, including with ECSEL. And we also think about low power technology and a lot of research that has gone into the industrial strengths of the European companies. And now we look forward to the JU Key Digital Technologies. It has a significant increase in terms of budget compared to ECSEL, at least on the basis of the Commission proposal, because this proposal is still under discussion in the Council of the European Union with the Member States. So on the basis of our proposal, we should be able to mobilize all together for the next 7 years about 7 billion euros in this area through the joint undertaking. And the scope will be a little bit larger because we want to put more emphasis on software, because we do realize that software and electronics work very much together, and bring in also photonics, for example, silicon photonics is a very important area of development that is very much complementary to the microelectronics area. So there are new activities we want to bring in with a new budget, and we are really counting on the participation of member states and the industry, including small, medium enterprises, because we have greater objectives also for small, medium enterprises. And so I really look forward to working in this new configuration and with a great participation of our European stakeholders.
We see a current dip, we still see a current dip in the supply of the semiconductor chips at large. Because you are a fab and you're immediately affected,
Can you just sketch a little what are the reasons behind this current tip, and whether this will be a momentary situation or a more fundamental situation?
Okay, hey, first, thank you for the invitation, Bert, and really good question. And as you said, the semiconductor industry, in particular the foundry industry, is very popular currently due to the supply, right? So, hey, let me describe a little bit the situation. We have an extremely high demand. And this is driven by multiple factors. And one factor is COVID-19 basically uncovered pretty brutally our gaps in digitalization, and now everyone would like to fill them. And then secondly, we are in a conversion from combustion to e-machines in the car industry. And third, we have a couple of global trade wars ongoing, and digital sovereignty is really a big topic currently. And in all this environment in total, right, this led to an extremely high demand on chips, in particular for consumer electronics to catch up in the digitalization, but also in the automotive industry, basically to allow a smooth and fast transition from combustion to e-machines, and also making out of cars more driving computers. And then your next question is this kind of just temporary or will this be longer? I simply have to tell you, it's really a strong demand over multiple years. We have customers signing with us long-term agreements, supply agreements with a horizon of roughly 5 years, some of them even longer. So it's really a strong demand which is going on for the next years. And I'm 25 years in this business. It's a special situation right now.
Very, very happy to hear. Now we have two good things now from this discussion. We have increased capacity. We have a perfect technology. What else should we have in Europe to adopt to the international competition? What is then still missing to catch back on the, let's call it international competition with the Asians and the Americans?
Okay.
What needs to be more?
Let's say it this way. First, we really would like to play our role here in digital sovereignty of Europe and Germany. And to be a little bit sovereign, you need to also have the whole supply chain a little bit under control, right? So we depend here in Dresden also on chemicals, for instance. And right now we have sometimes really the challenge to bring them from Asia, US chemicals to Europe, which are not fabricated here in Europe. I think this needs to be really looked at, that this supply is more robust, and it's also greener to fabricate this closer to the fabs. Basically less CO2 footprint, not so long transport ways, more reliable transport ways. I think this is one we should look at. Another thing which is really we talked here about wafers currently, but you need to also package them in plastic, right? At the very end, you want to have a chip, right, and not a wafer. And here probably we need also to look in Europe how we bring packaging technology on scale to at least serve some of the production and industrialize this again in Europe. Right now, I think we all depend, the world depends actually on Asia to do packaging. I do not know any other place where you have really a significant capacity for this. And then, of course, we need to look on the decision making, right? So we talked now a lot about we have a good technology. We all have the will to do something, and I see also the European Union and the governments have the strong will to improve the digitalization and sovereignty. So, but now we need to execute also, and here we see the need for faster speed.
Quite recently, the Commission issued the new industrial strategy document. and maybe for the benefit of how to say the audience, the ECS sector, can you sketch what is important for the digital sector and the microelectronics within that communication, within that document?
This document is supposed to draw lessons from the crisis. It comes actually just 1 year after the first policy document from the European Commission on industry, and it is meant to make the point and to draw lessons from the crisis, which means that there are three main elements that are being considered. The first one relates to the importance of the single market. We have all observed, including industry, the many disruptions that have taken place in the single market, and therefore this is the first area of attention. The second area of attention is the so-called dependencies of Europe in strategic areas, and certainly microelectronics is one of those areas. And the third strand of attention is on the so-called twin transition. So the green, the sustainable, and digital transition. What is that we are saying there? We are saying that this crisis, as perhaps any crisis, has been an accelerator of trends, meaning that instead of weakening the twin transition agenda, this pandemic has accelerated the need, including for industry, to address sustainability and digitalization. And in this document, we are exploring ways to support industry in all these areas. And I think for microelectronics in particular, the dependencies strand and the twin transition part is particularly relevant. Now, if we go a little bit more concrete, I think it's useful to mention the support that the Commission will continue to give to the so-called industrial alliances. What is it? It's about supporting pooling of the industry, but also of other relevant actors like the public sector, but also the investors, etc. So pooling all these actors together in strategic areas and areas where these alliances are identified as being one of the best tools to accelerate activities that would be difficult or more difficult, let's say, to develop otherwise. And these alliances, we think, should be complementing public-private partnerships and provide a broad and open, so I insist also on the open platform in order to establish strategic roadmaps and effective coordination of research, development, innovation, investment plans for technologies in industrial ecosystems. The Commission is now is already preparing a couple of new alliances, and one of those two is precisely on processors and semiconductors technologies.
We both working closer to the market, to the ECS market. So maybe looking towards the future, how would you like to see any further synergies we could develop between DG Growth and KDT as the new generation joint undertaking? What would be ambitions? What would be possibilities, opportunities in that respect, Valentina?
Bert, I'm very grateful for this question, and I'm really genuine here. I really think that you know, an holistic approach is necessary if we want to do things, because this is at the end of the day what we want to do is to do concrete things to help industry to thrive in Europe. And by saying holistic, I mean that we need to really join up forces, and perhaps in ways that we haven't thought of before. And I think you are potentially a key partner in bringing the industrial agenda forward in the field of activity which is yours, and a field of activity that we, as we just discussed, is extremely important for Europe.
What would be the key factors that you say, well, we have to keep on being involved in the ECSEL or for the future in the KDT program? What's in for ZEISS to participate in our program?
We have developed an ecosystem since the beginning of the EUV program 25 years ago. Meanwhile, we have more than 1,000 partners we are working with. And many of these partners are participating in the ECSEL program with us in the projects we are running there. So the ECSEL gives us the legal framework. That's one advantage which we have. It gives a legal framework where we can operate, where we can build trust with each other. And on the other hand, it gives us the financial resources to mitigate the high risks involved. I mean, typically in our projects, we have to make decisions where we don't know whether it really will work out as we expect, or whether there will be issues to overcome. And to have this ecosystem of real world leaders, technology leaders, and the financial backing by the EU and the national states gives us a position where we can take on higher risks and also be faster in the achieving our technical goals. Yeah.
The ambition of the Commission to think about building a mega fab in Europe. Currently, you know very well, the semiconductor industry is facing a shortage in capacity, and the demand is higher than the supply capacity on chips at this moment in time. There are various reasons. One obviously is the lack of production capacity. There is an idea going around on why don't we build more capacity in Europe, in or related to the important project of common European interest. What, as an industry player, is your take on this?
Future access to this leading edge node is therefore critical for Europe. Building own capacity is one way to go. However, this requires high efforts and high investments in fabs, in infrastructure, in the development of the processes required. And it needs also a long-lasting commitment to follow through over the next decades. Another approach is to leverage the European assets in this global interdependence. Again, EUV is a good example for that. Here, a European ecosystem has managed to develop and master a key technology for semiconductor manufacturing nobody else can do in the world. So we have a very unique position in this key technology for making leading edge semiconductors. And also KDT in the future can contribute to securing the digital sovereignty of Europe with a much higher leverage effect by investing a relatively small amount of money compared to making own fabs in Europe.
Components and systems is working very hard to prove the benefits towards greening, the Green Deal, environmental challenges. But are we sufficiently known on what we are doing for climate action? Is there enough information flow?
I think that it could be more information flow. On one hand, like generally, globally, politicians, decision makers are aware that we need twin transition. So to have a Green Deal, climate action, and also digital transformation, and we have to work together. But sometimes this is not communicated on all levels. For example, when I speak with climate experts and environmental experts, they think that digital technology is creating more emissions, that we have huge consumption of energy in digital devices, in electronic systems, components, and there is also some kind of rebound effect. So with new digital devices, we have more consumption. So it's in certain way creating more emissions. When I speak with digital experts, they say there is a huge potential to decrease emissions through more efficiency, new smart devices, helping energy, agriculture, industry to reduce emissions. So this is like enabling effect. But as I mentioned, these experts, they don't communicate sometimes together, and they have different view of these issues. So I think, yeah, there is a need to communicate more and also to focus on two issues. Firstly, it's like greening of digital technologies to be more efficient, to reduce consumption, and on other side, to use this enabling effect of digital technologies to reduce emissions in different sectors. And we need digital technologies everywhere, like in smart grids, smart cities, also to improve mobility and agriculture. So I think there is a huge role for digital sector to help us to achieve our main goal, climate neutrality by 2050. All systems together with our knowledge about climate, environment, about systems, putting together transport, energy, but also how we are living, how we consume, how we travel, how we work. So everything together with the aim to have sustainable life, sustainable economy, and without digital part, that's impossible. So for achieving climate neutrality, to have stable temperature, so not to have more global warming and negative impacts, we need to put everything together, and we need efficient digital devices. So I would like also to encourage companies to join the European Green Digital Pact. That it's companies, they are having ambitious policies to achieve climate neutrality earlier, not by 2050, but some by 2040, and to work on different strands. So to use renewable energy, to have science-based climate targets. And I think this is a good example because digital companies, they can lead by example, and also they can help other companies to reduce their emissions. So if we don't have strong European sector in this area, we are not going to advance quickly, and we will be behind our main competitors. So strong system, strong sector focusing on electronic components and system is a must for the EU. And I hope that with your assistance, with your help, we can achieve our objectives. So by 2030 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 55%, and by 2050 to achieve climate neutrality. And for that, I'm looking forward to work with you.
We all do understand the importance of digitalization in the industrial world, and this in a wider perspective of in the international competition. I think it's necessary, it's mandatory to stay at par with the Americans, with the Asian people. To that extent, we in ECSEL have been, how to say, working on lighthouse initiatives, which we would try to get, how to say, different communities together, closer together. Can you elaborate on what you have achieved with the Lighthouse on Industry 4.0?
A very broad question, Bert, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to answer. And I guess the context for engaging in this, both for me, my partners on the LIAS, the Lighthouse Group in particular, and supported by the CSA for Industry 4.0. The context for all of this, of course, is the international competition that we're seeing right across the globe. I mean, if we look at, you know, the Chinese in particular and the work that they're doing in MIC 2035 and the focus that they have not only on automation, for example, but IP that they're generating, the underpinning of all of their technologies and digitization. We know, for example, that the American system is very well structured around the exploitation of IP, and a lot of that is coming from the ECS community. And I suppose the challenge in Europe is, how do we face forward? We have quite a lot of structures and strategies in Europe which are contending with and managing internal relationships. Things like the single market is very, very important to us in Ireland, as indeed it is to you in Belgium and elsewhere. That access to single market, it's a level playing field, that we can all work together in a coherent manner. But we equally need to understand that we are exposed to internationally a very strong competitive base that is not limiting itself to some of these thought processes and structures that are very necessary within our realm. And I think it's within that broader context that the Industry 4.0 Lighthouse exists. And I suppose what attracts my partners and myself on that LIAS group is the opportunity to bring the communities together. So what does that mean? So you're talking about everyone from the end user of a product, the European citizen themselves, the taxpayer within this. Are we creating products that are enabling these citizens, our colleagues, ourselves, our families, and so on, to reach those grand challenges that Europe has set for us? You know, we have an aging population. We've got attributes there in terms of how we manage our green initiatives going forward. Digitization is an enablement for a better life for our citizens within this. So we're all part of that broader community, and that's where we see ourselves sitting. So how do we connect the expectations and the requirements of that end user, that customer, through next best practice products that are easy to use, they're accessible, that are European in their DNA and in their funding and in their exploitation? So are we enabling that in a mature way? Are we enabling at next level up our companies, these OEMs, these SMEs that are in supply chains, these people that are so important to us? I mean, the 7 trillion turnover that Europe has from its manufacturing facilities all over Europe, 80% of our exports off the European trading bloc come from the manufacturing sector. Is the digitization output, this Industry 4.0, which is after all a European nomenclature? This is our term. We came up with it in 2011, 2012. the Germans, and in particular the Dutch, I guess, and leading into the broader European community, an understanding of what this transition was, an enablement of it. We've seen fantastic leadership from the European Union and indeed the Commission in this context. So part of the lighthouse that we have here in Industry 4.E is to connect those communities, is to understand across the broad ecosystem, not just within KDT or ECSEL, but rather right across the broad ecosystem. What are we doing? What are we prioritizing in ECS? Where are the overlaps? Where are the gaps within this? How do we strategically orientate ourselves to understand what is important? What's critical? Do we really understand, sovereignty within digitalization, for example? How are we going to enable and move these processes and these concepts forward? And are we placing these bets in the right area to enable a very full future for our industry partners? I think that's where we're positioning this at the moment. We do need to get to, not just in terms of self-sustaining and so on. We need to have the right voices in the room. And I don't think that any of us are at the point where all of the right voices are in that room at this particular point in time. So for example, we don't have enough women within these groups. We don't have that gender balance or that gender equality with any of these lighthouse elements to this day. And that needs to be addressed because there's a broader ecosystem there that we need to be able to reach into and to speak authoritatively on. And if we don't have those voices, we don't. Equally, we don't have enough industrial partners, pure industrial partners that can help us with things like structural policy within not just an organization, but within member states within the European Union. So I think those are really strong voices that we need to put into these rooms and to get them to the next level. But in terms of self-sustaining, I think these groups add tremendous value to the ecosystem itself, and equally can add tremendous value to those of us who are taking the time to partake within a structure like this. So for example, somebody who's working with an Industry 4.E liaise group, and you'd be very welcome to knock on the door and reach out and see if there's anything that you could contribute to it if you're listening to me today. But equally, we sit in a very privileged situation here. We're able to see quite a lot of the research that's out there. We have access to some of the most influential minds right across the European Union. And we're very much hoping that in conversations with the governing board over the next number of months as KDT evolves, that there will be a role for our lighthouse group in 4.E to be able to directly into the ecosystem some of the more strategically important points for us, whether those be conceptual elements that are coming to the fore and practical within manufacturing at this point, or maybe some lighthouse elements that we feel that there's a gap in the system that should be addressed because we're missing some of the more strategic elements that the European Union may need to do over the next medium to longer term, possibly, in order to put a footprint down in this place. So at the end of all of this, we serve a higher order here, and the higher order ultimately is going to be the European taxpayer. But for us as individuals, we are in a TRL level, if you like, journey around research. Some of it is fundamental research that absolutely has to be done, and we need to have that community and that voice coherently within the ecosystem, and equally that it's transitioning up to a more complete, competitive, practical product that our practitioners can use in an effective manner. And I think that's the challenge. So if you're an individual and you want to talk to people or peers within different ecosystems across the European Union, across different levels within this, across different regions within the European Union, and you want proper ideation and proper analysis of what we're doing at a global level within that context, then I think this is a powerful group to be part of. And I think not just the KDT, but many of our PPPs, and particularly the Commission themselves, will be looking to ideation groups like this for some input. I think it's incredibly important that these voices are structured in a way that they're articulating and orientating a bigger, broader view picture that accentuates the excellent work that the governing board, for example, is doing in ECSEL, that there's another voice and another system that can put some input into that.
No, I think you're very right, and indeed, as you indicated, we working with these type of lighthouses to next higher level of cooperation. I mean, we are all used to work at a project-based, which is very practical, operational, pragmatic working together. What we are trying to do with the lighthouses is really building communities, building kind of new communities. Yeah, the ECS, we know each other. Yeah, but we probably do not know enough what the industry community, the IoT community is trying to achieve, and we really need to bring these both closer together. a clear question gets a clear answer from our side, but maybe not all the questions are very or sufficiently clear. And we both know that building the lighthouses is a little tough because it's a little out of the ordinary. We're thinking a little out of the box, and we're happy that in many occasions we refer to as an example of building communities. And building communities is it's building, how to say, the next level of how to say, cooperation. Norway is an associated country. You participating in that respect to the European program. Why would Norway participating country, an associated country participate in our program? What's in for Norway participating in ECSEL?
Well, obviously, Europe is our largest trading partner, so we need to be involved in Europe, even though we're not members of the European Union. It's not my fault. I voted for it, but it is what it is. Also, remember, we're just a tiny country on the outskirts of Europe, so we have a limited population, and we're spread over a large area. So we really see being a part of KDT in the future is that we can leverage our expertise with a larger audience. We can network with a larger group. Also, because of the fact that Norway, because we're very small and we have a very limited population, it's hard for us to make policy on things like components. We don't have a huge industry of components or anything like that, but we do participate. We are very good at certain parts of it. So this gives us an opportunity to participate and compete on a European level.
The central management of financial contributions. This would mean that, in simple terms, that the office of KDT or ECSEL would be responsible for not only managing the European side of the funds, but also the national. Norway, you are very much positive for this kind of approach. Can you just explain why you're so enthusiastic on CMFC?
Well, altruistically, I can say that it is because we want to make things simpler for our participants in order for them to be a part. So that means that they only have to go one place, they only have to fill out one set of forms, they only have to sign one contract. But also on another way is to say, it is, as I say, we are a small country, we're isolated, we have a very strong public sector, which means that it's expensive. And so to a certain extent, we need personnel. And so for us to be able to outsource certain things is quite positive.
So in very simple terms, we take over the Norwegian part of the administration in simple terms. Now, that's obviously, together with the simplification for the beneficiaries, by all means, we are very much happy and open to do so. Though the money will be allocated by the Horizon Europe set of rules. Yeah, that is not a hindrance to implementation.
Not a hindrance for us, no.
Okay, good. So we are happy and happy to do so, the central management, and we will do our utmost to make sure that it's satisfying all of your requirements, but you will not be the only one. So you need to see also to the other member states. Yeah.
Yeah, the only hesitation we've seen is to a certain extent, we lose that contact, that direct contact. But at the same time, the way it's worked before is we're able to set certain regulations in order to have matching funding. So we get the contact that way.
We are in the preparation of the work plan for KDT, slowly but steadily. And to that extent, also, we are working towards putting specific priorities, slightly different from what we have done in the past, where we had the large SRE, a strategic research and innovation agenda. We would like now to come up with priority topics, let's call it. Mm-hmm. So returning the question to you, what would be a Norwegian priority topic in the work plan?
We do have areas where we're very good that obviously we would like to see more participation in, such as the software and the low power aspects. But we also would like to see more in the sectoral business, because right now it's limited to mobility, which is really automobiles, unfortunately. But we would like to see things in the marine sector, the oceans, marine technology, that sort of thing. which can, we hope, be included in the mobility section and so forth, because we're very much supportive of the Green Deal. So.
Yeah, the greening, the whole greening discussion, and I think this has been traditionally a stronghold of Europe. How to say, the power electronics, let's call it. But
right.
Now we have a perfect mandate with the Green Deal, and I think we should, put all the effort to support the progress of the Green Deal and the implementation of the Green Deal.
Absolutely. Maybe
from two sides, how ECS, electronic components and systems, can contribute to the greening. But I think also we have to reflect on how we are producing all these components and systems.
And their life cycle, obviously.
And the life cycle, because I'm not always sure that we are the best in class if it comes to greening of our own process technologies. Some work to be done. So synergies are pretty obvious between our both, joint undertakings. So from the, let's call it, technical side, what do you reckon? What do you see as obviously technical synergies between our both joint undertakings? How can we serve you? How can we serve you better? What do you need for making the computer, the high performance computer, even faster?
So one analogy to high performance computing is the Formula One for cars, in which you have basically Formula One manufacturers are testing new technologies. They are testing new ideas. It's costly, and some of that generates real products that eventually makes it into our consumer cars. In many ways, you can compare that with the HPC industry, where the latest and greatest technologies and chip technologies, memory technologies, so on, are being tested, this is where we push things to the limit. And then as the technologies evolve and as they become, what should we say, more cost effective, they make its way, the technologies make their ways into enterprise equipment or consumer equipment. And by the way, it's not just hardware technology. This is the same for a lot of it also applies to the software domain.
Mm-hmm.
So I think where we can work together, it's natural that we work together. We, on the HPC side, we look to be driving some very specific niche components, but by working together, hopefully we would be able to already seed the idea that there's a market for it, for a broader use of and therefore making it more attractive for industry to get into the domain and to help us produce this European technology. The energy consumption of HPC systems is something that's very important to your HPC. There's very much a drive to not only have the fastest machines, but also in an energy-friendly way. Supercomputers will most likely always consume a lot of power, but limiting how much a lot is worth a lot. And essentially, so we are very in all of the decisions that's been made in and around the supercomputers that we've procured, energy and how the energy is delivered to the hosting entity has been one of the deciding factors. So that is something in and around the greenness, if we can call it that, of the HPC system is key. Now, that's not only to consume less energy as such, it's also to require less cooling, which means we can have even bigger machines in the same space and so on. So it becomes it becomes important from a number of angles, not just using as much power, but also actually being able to do more with the same power.
How can we catch back? Yeah, what would it need us to catch back on the advanced state of the latest Chinese supercomputers? Yeah, what would it take us? More money, more working together, I don't know, brighter ideas, new architectures. What is how do you see this, the international competition, and catching back on that?
So in the HPC domain, it's clear there are multiple players, and not all of them are European. There's a really good collaboration and cooperation between all of the players in the field. I do need to point out, though, that there are areas where Europe is leading and bringing technology to the table. It's very much on the software side, it's in the application side, but also the cooling solutions. Some of the cooling solutions that are developed in Europe have actually defined HPC worldwide. So there's really some good stuff. I think the problem, to a certain extent, is money. For some of the technologies where we're lacking a bit behind, we've discussed processors. Processors is an extremely expensive.
Why a country like Belgium, the region of Flanders, let's say, is participating in the ECSEL joint undertaking. What's in for your region specifically, and what does it bring to the industry?
Well, if you take it from our perspective, we just can't stay out of these kind of things. I mean, that's not an option. And I will only give 3 reasons, but there's many more of them. A first reason, well, just call it IMEC. IMEC, that started as EMEC, the Inter-University Microelectronics Center, when they thought this will be too large for one university, so they combined Leuven, Ghent, and Brussels. It has outgrown, of course, Flanders, Belgium, Europe. I mean, it's a world institute, and you just can't have an IMEC in Flanders not joining a joint undertaking of this kind. I mean, both Europe cannot afford not having IMEC, and IMEC cannot afford having Europe. So that's a very good reason. And I mean, this is a strong support to the ECS kind of business. IMEC is there. This kind of instrument is there for that support. So there's no question. You can't stay out of that. Secondly, I mean, we don't have a large and major industry in ECS, but we have dedicated companies. I mean, these companies are coupled into our industry, into automotive, into health, into imaging, into whatever. So, and the instrument allows them to couple into this environment, have collaborations on R&D. I mean, staying away from that is not giving the opportunities to those companies as you should. And then thirdly, and that was one of the things I thought of a couple of days ago, I mean, we have splendid, good university training. What if you stop at just training people and not offering them a landscape for startups, for high-tech, innovative startups, these kind of things, to collaborate? I mean, that would mean you would just have making plans, never building the house, never living into it. And I don't think that you can keep top architects really available and at hand. So that's the environment you're creating, and that's why you should couple as much as possible into instrument like this. And the joint undertaking instrument is a good instrument. I mean, yes, it has flaws in the way that we are doing it, and we are learning and balancing things, but we need to collaborate. I mean, collaboration is the future, and any instrument, any huge instrument in Europe is very, very welcome.
If I may ask, would there be any specific priority from the Belgian Flanders region you would, favor in this activity of priority topics in the first round of KDT calls? What could be your call on that, your opinion on it?
Once again, not from Flanders. I mean, not a strategic focus, but I think we really should insist on working together with the public authorities, with all of the public authorities, to make a European strategy. Because I see that other continents are doing, America is doing currently, China is doing, the Asia is doing, and I think we should have an elaborate kind of working together, of making a European strategy. This is not the business of having a local strategy for an environment of 6 or 10 million people. That's folly, and that's something I missed. And on the other hand, we took the initiative, and it was from Andrea Cuomo. We started off with Lighthouses, trying to align out of the public authorities as well, more kind of a strategy. So we would very much love to take this kind of path, to discuss it both from the policy side and from the industrial side, because we shouldn't have this work plan over-tuned by the private members that are dedicated companies that have an own interest and own vision. We should add a European vision on top of that, but not from a local kind of strategy. I mean, and certainly not from a small area. But if you would ask me, I would be very happy if in 7 years from now you would see better strategic lines in the work plan, but based on a solid discussion with the public authorities together.
No, I do believe, and I can only agree with you, having experience in the 2 types of partnerships, in the bipartite and the tripartite, that really this tripartite is what I call really the building of Europe. Yeah, what you align the public sector, the Commission and the member states, and the private sector behind a certain technology ambition, technology flag, and you're really building the community towards clear directions. And I think it's a very good model. It's not the most simplest, but I think it's worth the effort, because we do see alignments, and to a certain extent, Francis, the building of the IPCI, the European Project of Common Interest, has its initial origins in the ECSEL community, where the people knew each other, where they start discussing, and that's, I think, how the first IPCI.
I think on IPCI, if you would look at it today, we have the second IPCI on microelectronics. But I have been looking at that some recent articles. For a really good working IPCI on microelectronics, we would need the tripartite structure. Currently, the IPCEI is based upon funding out of one member state. And if we have the ambition of to bring back to Europe, let's say, 2 nanometer technology, forget that you can do that out of member states. You will have to do that on European level. So the tripartite construction of ECSEL and KDT, let it be a model for even stepping further up into the industrialization.
The ECS, the digital, is crucially important. We have recognized this during the lockdown and the pandemic, and to all or any other digital applications in the direction of health, of industry, of transport, environment, call it. Digital is important. In that respect, what kind of alliances should we contemplate at European level in order to strengthen our progress in this direction? And are there any boundaries? Yeah, do we have to worry about certain alliances?
Before we think about alliance, we need to invest inside the European Union in order to be strong in digital. We have the ambition to lead in digital, but in order to fulfill this ambition, there is a lot that we need to do. We need to do in infrastructures. We need to have the question of skills. We don't have enough skilled people, and related to that, and we can talk later, is also a question of gender. We are neglecting part of the population that are not choosing this area, or are choosing in a very small percentage. We need to invest also in research, fundamental research, applied research, and we need to regain something that is very important for Europe, that is the capability to manufacturing. We cannot be leaders on digital if we do not have the capability to be independent on microprocessors, for example. That is essential. This doesn't mean that after we cannot import from other parts of the world or make alliance, but we need to know that if necessary, and if something goes wrong, we can do it ourselves and we know how to do it, and we have the conditions to do it. And this is important in digital, is also important in all the fields, but especially in digital, that we want to lead, to be leaders, that all these that we really need to do. So we need to have the knowledge triangle very strong in terms of skills, in terms of research capacity, in terms of manufacturing capacity. And in the digital, we are quite good on some of the research, mainly on the software and more fundamental research. We have lost in the more applied and related to manufacturing. We have problems in the production itself, and we are missing the skills, and we are also need some more infrastructures. After we have these strengths inside the house, we can do the alliance. I'm very open into the alliance. We need to make alliance. We should not be a closed society in any case, and especially in research and innovation. But in order to open up to the others, we need to be strong. That is the first. I think that is important for us to do transatlantic with the US. It's important that we have, and from the side of the US, they have shown the willing to connect with us in clean tech, also in digital, in some common on the AI, in some common understanding, and that is important. China also keeping all the reciprocal respect to security and questions of cybersecurity, can be a partner in several areas, in general in Southeast Asia. So, but the condition to do these partnerships is not to be dependent on these partnerships. We have to do partnerships at the same level, and not to go back to a strong dependence as was shown during the COVID crisis, that we were so dependent in some of the areas. And in the digital, we continue to be very dependent, mainly in some components, and that we have to solve this question.
Which I believe is of importance and relevance also to the wider public, is that traditionally industry, and more specifically also the ECS, the gender balance is not in balance. We know that it's more biased towards a male community than a female community, despite some of the efforts we are trying to attract. What should we do more? Yeah? How can we make that there are more good women engineers, women students, women technicians in our community? What does it take to get us there?
That is a problem in Europe and worldwide, mainly in the ICT. We starting improving the figures of the women participation in STEM, science, engineer, mathematics. In Europe, the figures have increased very much, but not in ICT. In ICT, they have even slightly decreased compared with the 80s. It's unbelievable. Women do not choose ICT areas. I have asked for an initiative report in the parliament that I have finished. It was voted, it was very well accepted, to try to analyze the reasons. There was a study done by the parliament to try to address the reasons, and the conclusions from this study and after my report is that the choice is done very early at a very early age. So we really need to target very young girls, role models in the television, because we have very good examples. We have few, but very good examples that could have more visibility on television of women that are successful in the digital world. Because we have two phenomena. There are few women to choose, and they abandon more. The leaky pipeline phenomenon is higher than the other fields. So the figures is that we have only 18% of the professionals in ICT in Europe are women, and the students is 17%. So there is not a tendency to increase, and there is a lot of them that change the fields or go to work in something else. And this abandon of the field is also because we didn't achieve a critical mass. So because it's a very masculine world, they don't feel so easy, and they go to some other fields where they feel better. So it's very important because of gender equality. They are not participating in a digital economy that is a growing field with a lot of jobs, well-paid jobs, and we are increasing the pay gap and the pension gap. That is a problem because if they have lower salaries, they will have lower pensions. But also from the economic point of view and competitiveness of Europe, we are neglecting a huge talent that represents the women, and we need more skilled people. So we also need that women are engaged in these professions. So in my report, I recommended things for the family to be very aware since the beginning with the toys and with to the schools. Also the employment, because of the progress in the career, because it is also shown that they don't progress. The few ones that go to ICT, they have very slow progress in the career, much slower than the men, and after they try to abandon. So to make sure that in the firms they incentivize the women to stay. And to the society in general, social communication, social media, that role models are visible in television, in newspapers, and also even in movies. And this study has shown that, for example, in the US, many women went to law studies because of the series with successful lawyers, women lawyers. Probably if we have some special women in series that are digital, in the digital area, in cybersecurity, it will attract girls. These elements are very, very important, and we don't have.
The ECS, the electronic components and systems, often are called key enabling technologies. We are enabling many of the applications, and to that respect, during the activity of the Lighthouses, we have trying to link with other communities, with other ecosystems. So do you see this as the next step in merging or synergies with other technological fields?
Yes, I think the idea of bringing and defining these lighthouses have been a very inspirational, I would say, idea. I think that these lighthouses need to be reinforced, particularly in consistency of the kind of messages through the projects that they want to bring. First of all, I think it's very important because they represent a complementarity to other programs or other types of partenariats in the European Commission, according to their fields. They are in mobility, in medical field, in smart manufacturing, smart living, and this needs to be, I would say, even more enhanced in the future. I would say under ECSEL, it has been the beginning of it, so they have built communities of interlinks. But I would say the challenge ahead is to bring more consistency with the backing of all the stakeholders of the joint undertaking. Indeed, what I think it's also to bring the importance of what can be commonly done. And for example, in the entire value chain, there are really the field related to the electronic components and the smart system and the software that are the fields of such a GU like ECSEL. And then that further applications other fields of other partenariats to which we need to be interlinked. And we need to find the right complementarity, but also the right level of consistency. Where are the boundaries between one partenariat to the other? An exercise dedicated to collaborative research in our continent and with the help of the member states and the European Commission. But they are global players. So we need to be very careful and to bring ahead, particularly for the next type of partenariat, that their strategy not only fulfills what are the European needs, but also reinforce what is European inside in their fight in expanding their businesses and their research capabilities from Europe to the rest of the world. And I do think that probably there is a new age to rethink what was the concept, for example, of a few commissions ago, when we insisted very much in research in keeping a Europe open. I think we need to keep a certain level of openness, remove probably what has been too much of naivety around, but clearly also reinforce some willingness to be challenging when we want to achieve and address certain positions outside of our continent. So the global context should be very much taken in account, not only by our members that are exposed to it on a business day by day, but also by the public authorities and by the European Commission that are obviously extremely important partners as public authority boards. We also need to make sure that we are not cutting the grass under our feet. When we are missing, I would say, an important element that is outside of Europe and that we need to use it, yes, on medium long term, we need to find a path to build this missing element and try to reinforce the value chain within the continent. But we also need, in an immediate secured way, how to build the right alliance with potentially a non-European partner to secure certain other extremely strategic aspects of the value chain of the digitalization. And this, indeed, it is, we have to reconcile a certain wisdom. And I refuse to think that some companies or some attitudes should be schizophrenic. It's just that we need to manage at the same time a short-term resilience in order to secure these strategic pieces of business. And on the same time, we need to use the continuation of ECSEL to build on medium long term the missing pieces that we may analyze and that are extremely strategic to fulfill and complete and secure this value chain, this ecosystem in the future.
Traditionally, software is often judged as being the cheaper part or the less expensive part compared to the hardware. Yeah? Is there anything we can do about to reinforce the importance or the resources or the image related to the software, as they are much closer to the final application?
And I fully understand the perception that we have of hardware and software. But digitalization is clearly changing this perception because software plays a key role in digitalization. If then you consider the fact that Eurotech operates in the high reliability market where you have to ensure to your customers long-lasting solution, in a similar domain, software doesn't represent just an enabling technology for digitalization. It makes digitalization more sustainable because software can decouple the high-level services, functionalities, application from a specific hardware. And in this way, you can guarantee long-lasting solutions. So for us, software is extremely important today. But this is the never-ending story of hardware and software. Let me say the yin and yang. And when we discuss about software and hardware and software, it sounds to me a bit weird because we shouldn't discuss it. Specifically in the ECS domain, where hardware and software
let me use a comparison, are like an intimately close couple that you simply cannot separate. In ECS, the boundaries between hardware and software are literally disappearing. And so we should consider a more systemic view and finance the entire value chain, the entire ecosystem made of hardware and software on which the ECS value chain is based. And from this perspective, our community, I think, made significant progresses and also important cultural improvements. Consider, for example, the ECS strategic research and innovation agenda. Consider how it has been evolving in the last years. It has become really the expression of the entire community that is trying to speak with a single voice. And as a chairman of the next release, the SRIA 2022, I will continue certainly in this direction. It's extremely important. Another example is the more intense and close collaboration between the three associations.
Shouldn't we look at the educational system?
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's today, at least in Europe, it's a significant issue. Companies that are operating in the electronic components and system market certainly need new type of figures, especially when it comes to digitalization. And the problem of finding them, the problem of education and professional training is really becoming a critical issue. For digitalization is particularly true because digitalization requires a wider technical background and a wider expertise, both in hardware and software. Then we have to consider the specific companies and where they are positioned in the value chain. There is certainly an area in the middle of the value chain where the physical world touches the digital world. This is the area where we found the basement of digitalization. And in this area, certainly personnel with both hardware and software competencies is required. Then if we move in the value chain toward services and application areas, in this area, for sure, we need the overall knowledge of the entire digitalization process. You have to possess a cultural knowledge of the entire process, but the job description is more software background, software related, both in terms of background and expertise. And as I said, we are an hardware manufacturer, so as a company that look for revenues in that sector, we certainly look at hardware personnel, but this is very well consolidated in the company because this is our historical core business. In this specific moment in time, I would look more on hiring people with software competencies, because as I said, that is the area where we expect a major increase in the next 3-5 years.
You're working very hard to realize the ambition of the European Commission related to the Green Deal, I'm sure. And that is covering many aspects like, reduction of emissions, energy efficiency, renewable energies, and so on, so on. Obviously, for achieving your objectives, you need a lot of, digital technologies. How could a program like ECSEL or in the future KDT more substantially contribute to help you to realize your ambitions?
Thank you again, Bert, for the kind introduction. Thank you for reaching out to us and for the opportunity to share maybe some thoughts with you on this. Now, let me start with, of course, the Green Deal, which is a priority, as everybody knows, of the Commission, of the first announced by the President von der Leyen, and which came with a very important idea, in my view at least, that we need to accelerate our actions towards the objective of carbon neutrality. We had in the past other studies and plans on how to achieve the carbon neutrality maybe by 2050, but the idea now was not to postpone actions, and to start investing already in the coming years in order to get 55% greenhouse gas emission reductions already by 2030. The merit of this is upfront investments, moving the capex now and reducing operational costs later on over the life cycle of the projects. And this helps on the one hand to avoid stranded assets, but also avoid lock-in effects, especially in the energy sector. And when we know that fossil fuels are such a major source of CO2 emissions and methane emissions in general, so can really be a problem for addressing the climate, are at the core of it. So therefore, this came as a very important step forward in not only energy transition, but also modernizing our economies, modernizing the energy sector, which is aging much of the infrastructure in Europe. It so happened, unfortunately, that the COVID sanitary terrible crisis came, and now we need to speak about economic recovery. But in this economic recovery, we have to do things differently, and all these investments, which were in a way envisaged to do for the Green Deal, it so happens that now will help very much economic recovery and will help actually the economies to get back on track in terms of GDP, but with a different structure. Yeah, so this will be now, if you want, a real for sustainable economic recovery and to achieve the objective.
No, good to hear that, and it's very clear. On one side, we have the objectives very clear to us. We have the recovery requirements, we have the Green Deal, we have the digitalization, so we know what to do. We have the resources available, structural funds, Horizon Europe funds. We have the recovery funds, so we have the money. A lot will obviously also depend, then, out of experience, on the technical details, the way of implementation. Yeah, and I think we need to avoid there that we have too much red tape and too much, how to say, conflicting, administrative requirements, which would hamper to make this in a smooth way. And we should not waste our effort in solving technical administrative activities, but we should try to focus on the objectives we need to realize.
And we see now the necessity for a lot of the interactions we have, and also for the various partnerships which the Commission has put in place under Horizon to better cooperate and to see how to develop synergies between the different parts of the programs and who can
of course
from whom, and how in the end to bring things together. Yeah,
like digital, also energy features in an international landscape. How far does Europe, the European Union, has to consider, how to say, going forward in partnerships?
Yeah, it's clear that Europe has the objective of carbon neutrality, but has also the objective of competitiveness and being a leader in economic development. No? So one actually doesn't contradict the other, and I think this is what is changing substantially now. Europe was the first to declare wants to become the first carbon neutral continent by 2050, but you see that other countries started to join this race, and Japan has now sharing the same objective. Even more, China aims for the same thing by 2060. US was for a while not so much engaged in activities related to climate change. Now is coming back, and with a lot of interest, and of course with a lot of potential and a lot of technologies, and is a natural partner and one of the key partners for Europe. So we have a structured dialogue with the US on energy, but we have also structured energy dialogues with Japan, with other economies, plus, of course, with the neighboring countries. It's very important to build these bridges to help economic recovery across Europe, but also to help economic development in Africa, as we have this green pact with Africa, and which is also very much to trigger investments and to support economic development and to make all these new technologies available. We don't want that other continents keep investing on fossil fuels, on old technologies, inefficient, and creating dependencies which we know will not be to the benefit neither of the population nor of the climate. So, and this will not create jobs there, will not develop new opportunities. So this is what we have to tap. And I think from this perspective, we share quite a few interests, and of course to cooperate with the most developed economies, but also with the ones in development, to trigger investment, to help modernization of the economies or the development, depending on a case-by-case basis, and to look at all the dimensions. But you see, in the past, when we're speaking of the era of mainly fossil fuels, it was mainly about security of supply. Security of supply, of course, stays important in Europe. But now, in an era where we speak about climate change and global effort to achieve climate change and new technologies, the markets will change as well.
How hard, how far has your sector, the ECS sector, your business, been affected by the COVID?
So COVID has been with us now for over 18 months. So ironically, out of a terrible, difficult situation for many, many people, for us in the semiconductor industry, we have seen a massive acceleration of trends that we had been seeing, but these have been put on a completely different path now because of what the pandemic has done.
In the supply of chips, there was a shortage. Yeah. So how do you analyze this shortage of supply? Is this temporary? Is this permanent?
Well, I think the biggest impact that we've seen in Europe, that we've read in the newspapers every single day, is the impact that it's had on the automotive industry, and the fact that we have car companies actually slowing down production, ironically, because they're unable to manufacture cars because of chips. And I think this has been a real wake-up call for the European Union, that they cannot rely 100% on chips from other regions of the world for their manufacturing capacity. The automotive industry is the crown jewels of Europe, incredibly important, and it's going through a massive inflection through electrification and also autonomous vehicles. And in order to support all that massive increase in electronics in the car, we need to build our own supply chain in Europe.
Why does a company like Applied Materials joins our program? What's in for you? A bigger worldwide player comes and works together in the ECSEL community. What's in for you joining us?
Well, we've been a long-standing partner, as you said, of ECSEL. We have actually been participating in more than 15 projects, ECSEL projects, in the last 10 years. All of this is around collaboration with other companies or other institutes who together, the result can provide a much faster, a more efficient way of producing new ideas than if we do this apart. Our focus at Applied Materials really is on time to market. If you are able to bring out a new device or a new technology 6 months earlier, the value that provides to our competitors, our companies, our customers, as well as also the overall community, is enormous. Accelerating the time frame only comes when you bring like-minded people together and when you bring institutes together that augment each other. So when we work with organizations like LETI, like IMEC, like CEA, like TEA Delft, we're bringing together incredible organizations that can bring us much faster to a result than if we did all of this on our own. And obviously we need to find a balance there. But one of the, again, I talk about crown jewels, and some of the crown jewels of Europe are the RTO organizations that we have. These are unique. They are world-class organizations, the likes of which we don't have anywhere else in the world, I believe. And we need to take advantage of working together with them in these ECSEL agreements. So we're a big supporter. Applied Materials spends way over 12% of its overall revenue on research and development. This is something that we've done historically over many, many years. So this is a very, very important part of our business, and particularly for Europe, very important part of our R&D strategy.
But if we are looking future now, so the new program, Key Digital Technologies, is upcoming. What do you see from your perspective as technical priorities in for the future program?
So first of all, I would say from our perspective, the KDT, so the Key Digital Technologies, we see it as one of the most advanced and one of the most transparent tools that we see to foster a sophisticated research in Europe. And we really recognize what's been put together here. The focus, we think, we have an organization at Applied Materials called ICAPS, And ICAPS means Internet of Things, communication, automotive, power, and sensors. These are all what you call specialty semiconductor markets, and this is the fastest, one of the fastest growing areas in our business. And it's an area where Europe has some companies who are absolutely leading. I think of companies like Infineon and Bosch and ST Microelectronics, just to name three, who are all leading in their fields. So what I would like to see from my perspective is those areas need to become and stay our strengths, rather than in Europe, let's say, focusing on areas where maybe there are other companies or other regions who have better capabilities. I think in the area of microcontrollers, for example, we know for a fact that microcontrollers are definitely one of the key parts for the automotive industry. And this is a part that's been missing. This is the reason why some of the biggest companies, car companies in Europe, have not been able to manufacture their cars. We need to think about how do we take care of that area. So those are the areas where I would like to see the focus on our strengths.
Is there anything you would have on your wish list to ask me as the director of ECSEL, or a little wider to the governing board of ECSEL KDT? What would be number 1 or 2 on your wish list?
I think my number 1 item on the wish list is to have early involvement in the decision making, so that we can feel that we are in an area where we can provide direction and provide influence. So anything that we can do to get earlier involved in the decisions of which technologies are going to be focused, which areas, and the other, and also how do we generate sufficient talent pipeline in Europe in order to serve our industry. Those are the areas where I would like to see, things, I wouldn't say change, but just our influence to be increased. That would be something that I would have on my wish list. I'm super, super excited to see the European Union put a focus on semiconductor industry with their Digital Compass 2030 Pact. So I don't think there's a better place to be at this point in time than in Europe and this industry. And very happy to have been able to talk to you today. Thank you very much.
The COVID has learned us that the digital transformation, the digital technology is a must, and the digital transformation is a need for industry, for society. But we need to be sure that the values and the people are being kept respected in this digital transformation, and that we keep control on the human aspect of this one. So how would you believe can we implement this, or what are the points of concern for this aspect?
Yes, it's a very pertinent question indeed, and it's important to keep in mind the balance that we need to strike between regulating on the one hand, and it's important to regulate because regulation provides legal clarity for all stakeholders, whether it is the consumers, whether it is the investors. So it's important to have regulation, and Europe also could have an edge when it comes to regulation in the digital field, and that could become a digital leader from this side of things, whilst balancing out on the importance that we can never sacrifice principles, including the importance of human beings and human-centric technology. And even in the files we're working upon at the European Parliament, we always emphasize the importance of having, for example, human-centric AI, of having non-discriminatory technologies being applied without biases. We know how AI could have several biases, including when it comes to gender and the racial context, and therefore we need to address this. I believe that Europe has in front of it a challenging time in achieving this, but yet a very important opportunity to be at the forefront of—
How can we bring more of these resources together to realize the European Green Deal in the most efficient way?
Global challenges which Europe is also facing, and which Europe is trying to be at the forefront of, even being a leader when it comes to the green transition, require the efforts of everyone. And when I say of everyone, the policymaker cannot make it on its own. This would require the efforts of the citizens, it would require the efforts of governments, local governments, EU institutions, global players, along with industry. And this is why partnerships such as the joint undertakings under Horizon Europe are very much key in this regard. And when we speak of joint undertakings and partnerships and collaborations relating to digital technologies, they are even more key because we know how digitalization could, if implemented well, help towards Green Deal objectives. And we need to keep this in mind whilst making policy, whilst seeking collaborations, whilst incentivizing research and innovation, and whilst incentivizing collaborations such as partnerships. And yes, when it comes to the issue of budgeting, our priorities on an EU level relating to the twin transition of green and digital need to be reflected also in the budget, obviously. And I have no doubt that as you are following as much as I do, they are being reflected. Is it enough? For sure, there's much to do. And we need to make sure that we really leave no one behind in this transition. We need to make sure that our SMEs transit effectively, all regions transit effectively, and where we find sections of the industry or sections of our regions or sections of our citizens that will be more affected, we need to help them even more. And I wanted to bring up a figure here where Horizon Europe is very ambitious in this regard also. And it's important to remember that there are more than 50 billion euros under the Pillar 2 of Horizon Europe over the next 7 years, precisely to increase the European industrial competitiveness and also to make it live up with the global challenges of our times. So yes, Horizon Europe is a very important instrument in this regard, as are the joint undertaking and the private-public partnerships. And we need to continue working in this important field to make sure that we really achieve our climate targets, but also our digital targets. Let's remember that the European Commission has put forward a very ambitious agenda when it comes to the digital decade. And
how can we align next to the speed of climate and the speed of digital, development, also the speed of decision making, because that is not really the quickest process we have here in Europe. Yeah.
When we legislate, we need to keep in mind that the technology is fast evolving. And this is a very important aspect. It doesn't mean that we don't legislate. It's true that the process is very long sometimes, and this is a question of democratization too, and democracy, and negotiating and finding compromises, which is not always easy because you have persons coming from different political groups, persons coming from different nationalities, and along with that baggage, every policymaker would have their own personal baggage to bring on board. And therefore, it's a question of combining agility along with not giving up on principles, as long also to keep in mind the importance that when we legislate in this field or the policy in this field, we have to look at technology neutral solutions, for example. We have to look at a way of legislating whilst keeping in mind how to then quickly adapt that legislation via legal means if there are technological developments. And we have to have foresight. We have to keep in mind that with every legislation we put forward, with every clause, every amendment, we have to keep in mind what if this technology evolves in a way that we are not foreseeing. Now we cannot know the future exactly for sure, but it's important to keep this aspect always in mind. And we need to strike a balance as regards regulating to ensure that there is legal clarity in the market, whilst on the other hand, balancing out with the aspect that we regulate where it matters. We regulate where it comes to keeping our principles firmly in place, even when it comes to GDPR, data privacy, for example, when it comes to other important aspects. But we also have to keep in mind that we have to allow that leeway for these fast evolving technologies so that this legislation and policy making will not instantly become outdated. And to share an example from the SBA process of the Single Basic Act we are undertaking today, where just after this interview, I'll be off towards another shadows meeting, it's a complex process. So for example, it's a single basic act, and its process and its negotiations have seen more than 1,000 amendments, and more than 1,000 amendments with a strict time limit to negotiate is not easy. And we're having a lot of meetings, not only on a political level, but also a lot on the technical level. And this is a process I'm explaining to keep in mind that whilst we all have this urgency, there are a lot of different aspects and layers which need to be fulfilled. And therefore, the key reply at the end is that we have to try and constantly achieve this not so easy balance, but we have to keep on striving. We cannot just say it's difficult and that's it, but we have to recognize it's difficult, but continue striving efficiently to achieve it.
Easy. Any advice you can give us to help to get quicker to an equal gender balance in the ECS, the electronic components and systems sector?
Yes, let's start from the aspect that when we speak about gender balance and when we speak about being at the forefront of the technological development in general also, we need to think about skills. And the skills bring me on to another point, which is STEM careers, STEM education, and the opportunities that they offer. And I believe that we have to keep this in mind. We say it and repeat it all the time, it's true, but it is very important to actually invest in these skills. And yes, we have a gender gap that we have been speaking about for some time, and even at the European Parliament recently, during last plenary, there was even a debate about this important aspect of STEM careers, which we have to keep in mind. And as an ITRE committee, gender mainstreaming rapporteur myself, I push a lot this aspect, and we even discussed it in a workshop organized at the European Parliament precisely last week, speaking about the gender aspect, how to address it, even when it comes to key technologies such as AI. And this is very important. We have missing female entrepreneurs, we have missing female programmers, we have missing females when it comes to STEM careers. And we have to keep this in mind along with the European Commission skills agenda and the targets for the digital decade. And indeed, although I know that it's a challenge, we, as I said earlier on with regards to the other aspect, we cannot give up on it, and we need to effectively deliver in this aspect. And it's important to eliminate gender stereotypes. And to eliminate these gender stereotypes and certain cultural discouragement, it's important to promote role models. We have positive role models in reality when it comes to females in this aspect. And I believe that these role models could play a very important role, because having females at the forefront, even when it comes to the governing boards of the joint undertakings, for example, will then bring a change in and of itself, because we know that females and males think in different ways. And this is a question of diversity and achieving a better product and service at the end of the day. And this is very important to keep in mind. We have statistics showing us that when you have governing boards, which are, for example, more gender balanced, or you have gender balanced employees at the workplace, it's amazing how results could be more effective. And we need to keep this in mind. It's not only a question of having more females just for the sake of it, but it's a question of inclusivity and of believing that this would lead to better programming, to less bias in AI, for example, to having key digital technologies developed in a way which could enhance this more inclusive gender balanced aspect.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate your presence here.
Thank you very much for the invite. It was a pleasure. I hope that also those who will follow it will find it informative enough. And let's keep in mind that we can get there in a better way if we do it jointly.